What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Funky Brain Podcast. And my name is Dennis, and this is my Funky Brain. I'm really excited about today's episode, and because we spend most of our time on the Funky Brain Podcast talking about like drugs and alcohol and those types of addictions that people associate addiction with. But today we're going to talk about food addiction, which plays a huge part of the American population, and it isn't addressed quite as much, although I think a little bit more nowadays than in recent past. But eating with stress, boredom, fear, loneliness, worry, anxiety, or happiness, all ways we define emotional eating. The American Psychological Association reports that almost 40% of people have eaten in response to stress just in the last 30 days. And I could say that I have. I know that I have. So along those lines, today we have a pioneer in her field of food psychology. Her passion and purpose in her career is helping others heal from their relationship with their food, their body, and themselves. So she's a podcast host, a best-selling author, a recognized speaker, and facilitative entrepreneur, currently operating as the owner of 4 distinct businesses, which is way too much. She probably eats too much too sometimes. But she's a registered and licensed dietitian holding a graduate degree in counseling and nutrition education, along with certifications in trauma, eating disorders, NLP, grief counseling, DISC, life coaching, and business coaching. Mrs. Wendi Francis. How are you doing today, Wendi?
I'm good. Thanks for the introduction.
I know that was a mouthful, huh? You're like really important.
I'm not. I guess I do what I feel like is important work. And
what's going on? How are you doing in 2020 here? Are you like hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there. I think that's what everybody just needs to do in 2020. I've realized, my word for the year, I know that I guess some people do words for the year. I do, is impact. You can kind of see that behind me.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I established 2020. But I think I'm going to change it to resilience, because I think that might be the word for just about everybody in 2020 is resilient. Can we get through?
Yeah, and we are going to get through.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity. We're all in different positions, but I think it's, I saw right when the pandemic stuff started, there was, remember Italy was like a few weeks ahead of us. They were like,
right.
That was where
that's right.
Big. And I saw this interview or read an interview from this guy from Italy, and it was really insightful, and it sticks with me all the time. He goes, things are about to change for you. And he said, there's going to be this quarantine, this isolation. He goes, use it as a time to learn and grow. Like read a book you always wanted to read, learn how to dance or do some sort of art, but step out of yourself and take this as a time for something new. And that's been sticking with me for the last 6 months.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think I do better, and I don't know how everybody is. Some people needed to slow down. Other people needed to speed up. And then some people needed to speed up in some directions and slow down in others, and I think that's what quarantine's done for people when that was going on. And then as we've been coming out slowly, it's interesting to see what happens then, right?
Yeah. In my case, and I've been talking about a lot, is like making sure you are having purpose of some sort, because I think purpose is really important for all of us. Otherwise, we turn to things like eating or drinking or whatever. But I think if you don't have purpose, you have to create some. It's your responsibility to do that. And so I talk about that a lot. What got you into this field of food addiction?
I was raised in a household where I had to figure out my environment on a daily basis, just based on who raised me. I was a single, my mom was a single parent, and I had no brothers or sisters. My mom was an alcoholic, and we now know she has schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, and a number of other diagnoses. So every day I was constantly trying to figure out my environment, and had a love affair, so to speak, with addiction, because my mom was an alcoholic. My father was also an alcoholic. I just wasn't raised with him. And both my step-parents were. So lo and behold, I had a crash course in addiction via alcohol, right? However, what was so interesting that crossed my path was I was an athlete. In high school, I was an athlete. I transitioned into college in some facets of athletics. And so I had this real love affair with food. of like how it fueled my body and what it did. So I wanted to be a psychologist going into just kind of a basic psychologist going into undergrad. And when I got into undergraduate school, and I've told this story before on my podcast, but when I've gone into undergrad school, I took an intro to nutrition class. And just out of interest, right? Of like, how does food actually, what does it do to our body? And there was a 1-page highlight, what's called a highlight in this nutrition textbook, on eating disorders and how professionals in the 80s were just really starting to crack the surface of working with an eating disorder. And so I took that 1 page, I brought it up to my professor, who I didn't know at the time was actually the head of the nutrition department. But I took it up to him and I said, this is really cool. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to work with people who have problems with food, and not physical problems, but mental problems, right? Like with addiction, with what the underlying issue is behind the disorder and why people eat the way they eat. And so lo and behold, I crossed paths with an amazing man, and he looked at me and he said, you can do whatever you want, and I can show you how to do this. And so there became my love affair really with my career. You know, I started out, I went from undergrad to graduate degree. My graduate degree, my undergrad was in nutrition, clinical nutrition. My graduate degree then went on in counseling, psychology, and nutrition education. And then I worked for a dietitian who specialized in eating disorders, and then developed my private practice right off the bat, because it was just a passion of mine. The way my brain works, it is and always has been very different when I work with somebody and figure out why they're doing what they're doing. Like, that's always been the interest to me. And that's what I do with food. And my brain just works in a different way when it comes to that. Awesome. So lo and behold, I'm, 27 years in now. Yeah. I don't think I'm turning back.
Well, I love hearing that. First of all, it's good to hear that you were able to figure stuff like that out at such a young age. Like, so many people struggle their whole lives trying to figure out, what do I love to do? So that's awesome that you've been able to do that. And I know, like, I deal a lot with, all types of addiction, because, it's a lot of the same principles. It's like, it's all emotional stuff. But then what we get into when we start talking about all these things is the cross addiction, right? So I'll stop drinking. And I do this too. That's why I said early on when I was doing the intro, like, I'll eat a bag of chocolate and I'm like, why did I do that? It's because I have that addictive personality and I'm not tending to my emotions, or I don't want to feel something. But I have that awareness, but most people don't. And is that what you run into?
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. And that was a really neat part for me as I was kind of training up in the ranks, so to speak, is, I didn't get into working with alcohol or drugs or that facet of addiction, an addictive personality construct, but lo and behold, I really did, right? Because so many of my clients that I've worked with, whether it be they have anorexia, bulimia, compulsive overeating, or just a facet of emotional eating, that there is the same addictive pattern. And a lot of it resides around wanting to not feel your emotions, and more so the negative emotions. It's rare that people see happiness and run away. But when you feel anger or pain or sorrow or grief, really wanting to sit in that emotional wave stinks. So just to put it lightly, right? And so the truth of it is, all addictions kind of cross that path or that pattern, whether it be jumping into a bag of chocolates or drinking down, a bottle of tequila. Like, it's the same.
It is the same.
Premise.
Or
it just
shopping.
Comes out in a different way. Or shopping, or
gambling.
Watching,
or porn, or whatever. They're all just distractions because I don't want to feel,
That's right.
And you said earlier, but it's like happy, mad, glad, sad. Like, I don't want to feel like I get overwhelmed by so many different emotions, whether they're good or bad. And all of a sudden I'm like doing something instead of doing what I should be doing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like in your book, you had, or on your website, it says your multifaceted strategies move others from reaction to action by focusing on the why they do things as well as the how. So can you dive into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So That's always been my passion. In fact, the clients that worked with me for years, if they could say one thing about me, they would quote why. Because I ask people that so much. I ask myself that a lot too, just revealing how I work. But I ask why. Like, so, okay, so great. So you didn't eat all day. Why? Or you ate a bag of chocolates. Cool. Why? Because I'm more interested in the why than the what. It's not the behaviors that define us. In fact, when we define ourselves by behaviors, we will reside in shame and guilt. We cannot define ourselves by our behaviors because we are not what we do. We are who we are. It's the why of who we are that really defines the what of what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then writing that down, like saying why, because everything I do with my practice is make sure that they have like extensive writing exercises. And I love that. That's such a simple question.
Yeah, and you can trace it back. For some clients, they can trace it back anywhere from 3 to 4 hours prior. Is kind of like what was the chink in the armor that started the turning wheels?
Yeah.
And then when did it lead up and what happened before? And I'll go into food, what happened before and during, what happens for you during, and then what happens after.
Ooh,
because it's in that during time that I have found so many gems of like, well, while I'm overeating, I don't think about anything. Or while I'm overeating, I don't feel anything. Or for some of my clients, while I'm doing it, I feel such self-loathing. And so there you can kind of find the why, right? And that enables us to really see the construct of why the behavior actually exists.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, it's subconscious. Almost all cases, it's subconscious thinking. It can go back to when I was like 3 years old, something happened. So digging into that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, and especially with food, with alcohol and drugs, I find that more so it can be a recognized behavior with what you've seen other people do in your life and how they react to things. With food, what's so interesting is that people can exhibit behaviors of overeating or undereating at a very early age. And we can go back in their memory banks. And I've had people really figure out that their love affair with chocolate started when they were 4 and they were upset about something that their father did. And they were eating, 3 Hershey bars. At the time, they didn't recognize it, neither did anybody else. But now that they're 40 and they're still overeating 3 Hershey's bars when they're upset, we can see the delineated pattern, which is the cool part when it comes to food, because you can really see how far that goes back and then what are the underlying belief constructs around that.
Yeah, I mean, that's powerful stuff. For me, it's Reese's, by the way, not Hershey.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Peanut butter and chocolate.
Well, now they have really good quality stuff. But anyway, I always say, like, it's not necessarily the problem, the food, the drugs, the alcohol, the porn, the shopping. That's not the problem. It's what I'm using to cope with my real problem. And that's why, figuring this stuff out rarely happens on your own. You almost always need a coach or accountability partner or shrink or of some sort, somebody to help pull this stuff out of you, because you're not going to get it done by yourself.
It's very hard to identify it on your own and then to break the pattern.
Right.
I mean, I've had clients be able, if you can move out of the denial space, which is kind of hard sometimes, right, to really see it for what it is, because when you move out of denial, the ego, here's how I look at it, the ego gets blown open. And with that comes a wave of shame. And I don't know anybody, even myself, that really could stand that bomb to my ego without going back into the behavior. Yeah. Right? Because it's so devastating to recognize that what you've been doing is not good.
Yeah.
So 1, breaking the denial is difficult. And then 2, really moving into awareness just doesn't happen unless you have somebody outside of you. You need somebody outside of you to teach you about patterns and behaviors, so then you can start to see it.
Somebody who's not emotionally attached to your emotional stuff.
Very true.
Yeah,
that's right.
Because, you're not going to see it on your own. And then the other piece of the puzzle, which is what I was going to dive into next, was that it doesn't just flip overnight. Now, for some people it does, but in a lot of cases, there is, you know, some people hit that wall and they're just like done the rock bottom thing, but it's really rare. And in most cases, you really need to dig into those beliefs and behaviors that were formed, you know, 40 years ago, and eradicate that behavior. And it comes from like writing and doing exercises that you normally wouldn't do, and in a lot of cases don't want to do, and for an extended period of time to change those behaviors.
That's very true. I mean, I think that yes, people hit rock bottom. And with drugs and alcohol, the different nuance for me with drugs and alcohol that's good and bad is that you can live without it. It's very hard at first, absolutely, but you can. You don't need, now granted, I'm going to tell you, withdrawal I've seen happen for both alcohol and drugs, and it's not pretty, and it can hurt, and it can be painful. But you can get through it, and then you can still live. The difference with food is that you have to eat.
Yeah.
And it's always around.
Yeah.
So that's the different nuance in recovery between the two facets. And it's not that one is easier or harder than the other. It's just the different nuance to it.
Yeah, and learning new ways to cope and to live your life without excess. Yeah.
Right, in any facet. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the struggle. So the struggle is that, this is a common misconception, is that, so if I just stop the harmful behavior, life is just going to unfold and be beautiful, and I'm going to make all the money and have the perfect relationships and health and stuff.
Yeah.
And then so the problem that most people have, like with relapse, whether it's drugs, alcohol, food, or whatever, is that life kicks you in the balls, because that's what life does. And you're like, well, screw this, bag of chocolates and a pint of whiskey, right? So how do we approach that? How do we handle that with food?
So, that's the difficult part, right? I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road. I mean, that's what I call true recovery. And I've had so many clients who have kind of worked up to this moment in time where I'll be like, all right, you know, you're doing great. And everything's kind of coming along, and they've gotten their patterns in control, and they're eating, you know, healthfully through the day, because you don't want to get blood sugar drops, because that's not going to help you either. I mean, there's a physical part of this, right? And then there's a psychological, but there's the combo. But where recovery really happens is when life happens, right? So when life happens, and I've had many clients call me and say, oh my God, this hurts so bad. Like, why are you making me feel this? And I'm like, it does. It does, but it's not going to kill you like food was starting to, right? It hurts, but an emotion is not an emergency. And an emotion is never going to kill you. It can hurt, your heart can break, your head, you can cry, you know, monumental amounts of water, but it's never going to kill you.
Yeah.
The other things will.
Interesting. I love that. What do you say? It's a emotion.
Emotions are not emergencies.
Emotions are not emergencies. Yeah.
They're just emotions.
Yeah. And like I've been going through some hard period of my life, and you know, and I called my sister one day, and it's funny, like I teach people this stuff, you do, but then when it hits you, so you're like, oh. But you know, and I called my sister one day, and I was like, you know, I'm really sad. And you know what she said? It's okay to be sad.
Yeah,
it's such a simple thing, you know.
Right. And you know, it's such a simple thing, but you know what, we don't teach our kids that. And that's that's a pivotal thing, that if I could change one thing about like what we teach children, whether it be parents, school systems, teachers, coaches, that we need to teach our kids emotional resilience of like, yeah, this totally hurts right now, and I got nothing to fix it, but I'll sit with you while the pain's here, and I won't leave you, and you won't leave you. And I'll show you that the pain can go away on its own, just like a wave. Comes in and goes out. But we don't teach kids that. I wasn't taught that. You probably weren't either, but I know I was not taught that. I mean, if I was in pain, either it was like, get over it, you're too sensitive, right? That's how kind of my construct was in my house. You need to be tough, you need to be strong. Yeah, right. That's how my construct was, right? Whereas in other households, it's, oh, you're hurt, let me give you an ice cream cone.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so, but we don't teach kids that emotional resilience.
No. So what are some of the tools that you use? So like I know with some of mine, who I just had a client this morning, and he's going away for the week. He's trying to quit drinking and smoking weed and all these things. And so some of the tools that I was talking with him about, I was like, well, when you get to a bar or a restaurant, text me. It's just like having that connection with somebody. And then the other thing I do is this, and I do this myself, cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's just like being aware of things, and, this pain actually registers in your brain. So there's actually a bunch of little tools that I give along the way. What are some of the tools that you use? Or you might use some of these too, but what are some of the tools that you arm? Because at the end of the day, it's about having tools to handle these behaviors and feelings.
Yeah. So one of the biggest tools I teach people is what I call poetic pause. So when things start to move too fast with food, they either they're going out to eat, or they're out to eat, or they're driving by the fast food restaurant, or they get home and their kids have a bag of Doritos out, and that's like a vice for them. That it's a pause. That it's I set my phone for 30 seconds and I just want you to pause and I want you to breathe. Because what happens in any facet of addiction is that things move quick. Once it starts, it moves too fast until you relieve that fast feeling with the outcome behavior. So just slowing down and pausing for 30, 60, 90, I just have people go in 30-second increments. Once you can pause long enough and you can feel a breath come, then it's a turn on your heels and walk away.
I love that.
That's great. And if someone's at a restaurant, you can take breaks by going outside or going to the bathroom. People don't have to know why you're doing what you're doing, right? It could be going outside and taking some deep breaths, putting in your headphones for a minute, listening to a song, and then moving back in. But that, we forget how simple, just like you said it, like that was so simple, what your sister said, but so profound. We forget how simple and profound a pause is.
Yeah, it is.
It can change everything.
It can change everything. And one of the tools there's a couple things there. One, and I was just talking to him this morning. He's like, what happens if somebody asks if I want to drink? And I say, well, you don't have to say, I'm really not drinking anymore. My relationship's falling apart. My health is bad. Like, nobody's thinking about it the way that you do. So know what else you can say? You can say, no, thanks.
Yeah.
Or can I have a soda? I think I'm going to get a soda with a splash of cranberry. My tummy's not good. Like, you don't need to describe it. You're the only one thinking about it obsessively.
That's right.
They're not. Yeah. So if you're like, no, thanks.
Yeah.
That's okay. And then the other piece, because I love the pause piece, is that, meditation is huge. You're like, well, I don't have, an hour to sit and meditate. Well, if you're in a situation, you said go to the bathroom. I tell my guys all the time, and girls, pull up YouTube and to type in 2-minute meditation, beach. Like, I like beach sounds. And go sit on the toilet for 2 minutes and reset your day. You don't have to wait till tomorrow to reset your day when you ruin a day and have to go apologize to people for screwing the day up because you got angry. Start your day over. You can start your day over 20 times.
Yeah. Every minute of the day, you get a new chance. Yeah, we need to have an end point. If you just say, just pause, inevitably what happens is you're going to pause, but that wave is going to rise again. That's what it does. And so if you don't have an end, I just need to hold on till this beeps at 30 seconds, and there's no end point, it's really hard to hold on.
I really love that. I'm going to start using that. I like that. It's just good to have different tools, Yeah,
absolutely.
One tool might not work for the same person, or one tool might not work on Monday, and I need a different tool on Tuesday. So it's like how you keep arming yourself. And
sometimes that depends on the emotion that you're in too. For some people with anger, they can handle that a whole lot better than sadness. And finding those things out about yourself is really helpful.
What are some struggles that you've had to overcome to get to be this successful woman that we see here today?
A lot. I mean, everybody has stories, right? And I mentioned a little bit of that, to be raised by a single mom with no siblings who had all of those issues was literally a struggle just about every day. And I have beautiful points in my life during that time. I made great friends. I learned resilience. I mean, there's lots of good that came out of it, right? But to be raised in that kind of household is difficult. It's definitely not easy. And I still struggle because I consider myself, even though my mom is still on the earth, I'm fairly a motherless daughter. I mean, when you have a mom that has that many things going on, and then she moved into oxycodone as I got older, and she was prescribed pain medication for backaches, and nobody asked her about how much she drank, so she quickly became an oxy addict. And so she doesn't reside a lot in my life. And so I pretty much raised my 3 children without a grandmother. And my father's passed from the earth. My father, as I mentioned, was an alcoholic, and he had his own issues, and we had our own struggles, right? And so I had to learn a lot about father issues and what that does to a young girl. And, so
what does that do? Can you describe some of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's intense. I mean, mother issues can be one thing and father issues can be another. But I can speak for myself, I didn't have any self-esteem at all for a really long time. I don't know. I think I started to get little micro bits of it through my education, which sounds interesting, but when you read off, that's probably why you read off so many certifications. When as I mentioned, in undergrad, my mentor became the head of the clinical nutrition department at my university. It was probably no surprise that he was a male, a very kind, loving male, right? And then when I moved on to graduate school, one of my greatest mentors was Dr. Dan Benedott, who was the sports nutritionist for the U.S. gymnastics team. And he took me under his wing, and I got to meet the whole U.S. Olympic gold team because they came down to Atlanta. And so I had some great things, but was it a surprise that Dr. Dan Benedott was my mentor? Probably not, right? Because I was seeking somebody to help me heal those wounds, right? But that's where I got my esteem from for a long time, was really in the what I did and not the who I was. And so I learned as I did more and more and more, and you can tell I still do a lot, right? I have 4 businesses. I have 3 children, 2 teenagers. So I'm really good at doing, but I think in the last 5 to 7 years, I have come more into my own about being. But that's what's missing for the young girl without the dad. That part of, you are just a great woman, a great girl, right? When you're little, and you will become a great woman just because you are. That goes away when you don't have a dad. And my dad was very conditional, even when I got to know him, because he was an alcoholic and he was really scarred. By the time I got to know him, he started drinking when he was 15. So he didn't, and he never came out of it. He died at 70 from multi-system organ failure because he smoked and he drank. He would wake up and have coffee for 2 hours, and then he started with beer until about 12 or 1, and then he would go to margaritas until he passed out at night. He functioned, he worked from home, but he worked, which is pretty amazing. But when I got to know him at 17, he was, obviously well past what I would define as an alcoholic, and he was a functional alcoholic, so to speak. But in that, a lot of our relationship was conditional. And so I never really learned the just, you're really cool as you are kind of message by any means from a male figure, which I'm continually working with as I raise my daughter and my children.
It really interesting. So I'll tell, and I've talked about this before. I don't know if I have recently, but so my parents got divorced when I was in, and I've talked to them about it, so it's okay to talk about this. But when in 1979, and back then there wasn't shared custody, so week on, week off, the way that there is now. So there's the presence of both parents in your life. And I only saw my dad, like, it was every other weekend. So it was like 4 days a month. Yeah. And so I didn't realize this, and it was pretty much everything you just talked about. I didn't realize this until it was relatively recently, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it hit me one day. It was like, what I used to do, and I did this subconsciously over the years, like you just described, I used to latch on to guys to teach me how to be a man, because nobody was around to teach me how to take care of a woman, how to work hard, and to do these things, how to shave, like things like that. And my mom tried, but she wasn't a man. And so
Yeah.
now that would have been good because I was doing that subconsciously. I was latching onto guys to teach me how to be a guy. The problem was I latched onto a bunch of idiots along the way. And then that's kind of the direction my life went. Like, I'm lucky to be here today, who I am and how I am.
Yeah.
But it was my own daddy issues there. And I love my dad. My dad's great. He's a very loving, caring, awesome individual. And we have a great relationship now. And we never really had a strained relationship. It wasn't his fault, but it just was what it was.
And I think when anybody's in a position of latching, if you feel like you have to latch to somebody to teach you something, that's where we can all go awry. Because then it depends on the message you get from that other person.
Yes, that's what happened. And that's codependency too, right?
Oh,
which is,
right.
Of course, that's the biggest addiction in the whole world is codependency.
Right. That's the truth. Right. And that underlies so many addictions.
Yeah.
Is that codependency component.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so how can people get in touch with you? They talk about your other businesses and how you help people and how you can help people if they wanted to reach out to you.
Sure. So I have my fourth business is my podcast, which is Overcoming Emotional Eating with Wendi Francis. So you can find that on iTunes. And so I have that as a great resource. You can find that on iTunes or www.wendifrancis.com. In that, we're also launching End Your Emotional Eating, which will be an online portal for people to be able to get on. It's a journey course that we've created, 11-module course that we created to help people end their emotional eating. And so we'll be launching that in the next couple weeks as well. And the other facets of my business, I obviously have my private practice, but I only see a few clients now because I'm super busy with my other two businesses. One is called Integrative Freedom, and that's where we train doctors how to do all natural weight loss with the psychological component. So I do their psychological end, and I train their staff how to do that. So it's not just cookie cutter weight loss. It really is weight loss while you peel the onion away and working with that food addiction and emotional piece. But the best way to get a hold of me is probably www.wendifrancis.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Overcoming Your Emotional Eating with Wendi Francis.
Awesome. So one last question then. I like to ask this one pretty frequently, so people that are listening to me a lot know. But if you can go back, especially because this is informative and kind of a relevant question to today's topics. But if you can go back and talk to your 16-year-old self, what would you tell that girl?
You got this.
Make an impact. Make an impact.
Make an impact. Yeah, I would. That 16-year-old girl just needed to hear "you got this," because I think at 16 I didn't know I had it. I think I tell her it's all good and you'll be amazed.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Wendi. I appreciate it. I think this was great. I learned a lot. I was writing things down that you were saying, and so I really enjoyed it. And thanks so much. And I look forward to being on your show soon.
I'm excited. Yep, absolutely. Perfect.
So
thanks so much.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for tuning into the Funky Brain podcast today. Have a beautiful day. Talk to you soon. So you can't think your way into a new way of acting. You have to act your way into a new way of thinking and being. Hi, I'm Dennis Berry, best-selling author, speaker, and life coach for addiction recovery. So many people are stuck in their addiction, whether it's like drugs or alcohol or food or shopping or sex or money, and they think they could just stop or try to figure it out on their own, but they don't change anything in their lives. Nothing changes if nothing changes. In order for change to happen, you have to change something. My clients will be like, oh, I'll stop tomorrow, or if this happens, then I stop, or someday I'll just give it up. And then they just sit around and think, and hope for different or better results, but it doesn't happen. You have to take action. Action most people aren't willing to take. People don't become willing until they're in enough pain, me included. And unfortunately, they wait, and time passes by. Even if you are willing, you don't even know where to begin. And that's where I come in. In my best-selling book, Funky Wisdom, A Practical Guide to Life, I talk about the how approach. How do I get sober? How do I stop doing drugs? How do I become healthier? How do I have more successful relationships? How do I become more financially successful? And the answer is how. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I have to honestly admit that there's a problem. I have to honestly admit that things aren't going well and there needs to be changes. And then once I do that, the door opens and I become open to seeing new ways of living. And then I become willing to make those changes. You can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. That's why I'm here to help. And I've been working with clients for over 15 years and helping them get clean and sober and change their lives and achieve inner peace and success. If you or somebody you love is struggling and doesn't know where to begin and how to make those changes to get to where they need to be, give me a call. Not tomorrow or in a week from now when you are hungover and your life is falling apart. Call now. Start making that change today, and you'll be glad that you did. I'm sending you love and good vibes. Have a great day today.